You are not failing. You are simply being undervalued too long. And here's why. There's an unwritten rule, a silent code you've been forced to follow since childhood, one more dangerous than any religion, more effective at keeping populations compliant than any government could ever dream of. They don't call it by its true name. They just whisper it into you until it becomes a second skin. Be nice, be polite, be agreeable. They tell you it's the mark of a good person, a moral character. But what if that cultivated niceness was never about virtue? What if it was always about control? Every empire, every system, every authority that has ever existed has understood one fundamental truth. A polite population is an obedient one. A man afraid to offend will never revolt. A man desperate to be liked will never truly rise. Machiavelli, the cold observer of human nature, recognized this centuries ago. He watched entire republics crumble, not from external invasion, but from within, from men who lacked the courage to simply say no, men who tragically mistook superficial affection for genuine respect, men who were too soft to lead, too agreeable to survive the brutal realities of power. So, he penned a text that rulers feared more than any rebellion, a book that dared to declare, "If you want to command, stop trying to be loved." The church banned it, kings condemned it. Why? Because it exposed their greatest secret. That niceness is the invisible leash around your neck, a subtle but ironclad restraint. Yet, here we are, 5 centuries later, still willingly wearing it, still apologizing for actions we never committed, still forcing a laugh at jokes that insult our very being, still agreeing to demands that systematically drain our spirit, terrified of the social death sentence that is being called rude. Look around you. Every powerful man you admire, every leader, every conqueror, every architect of their own fate shares one singular trait. They are willing to be disliked. They do not chase fleeting approval. They command enduring respect. Society will preach that rudeness is evil, that you are arrogant, cold, heartless if you dare to deviate. They said the same about every great man who refused to kneel, every pioneer who refused to conform. Remember that. The world isn't deceiving you. It's testing your will. Here's the truth Machiavelli fought to unveil. You cannot be powerful and pleasing at the same time. You must make a choice, a hard, uncompromising choice, because the very moment you stop caring about being liked, that is the moment you become truly free. You become dangerous. You become real. What you are about to confront isn't some gentle self-help platitude. This is war strategy. This is a manual designed for the systematic eradication of the weakest part of you, the obedient, smiling servant who fears rejection more profoundly than he fears outright failure. You were not engineered to be agreeable, to be a convenient pawn in someone else's game. You were born to be formidable. So, kill the people-pleaser inside you. Do not postpone it until tomorrow. Do not attempt a gradual, gentle transition. Do it now. Because the longer that compliant, smiling facade lives, the more of your true, powerful self dies. There is a silent sickness spreading through modern men, subtle, insidious, and centuries in the making. It doesn't target the body. It devours the very will. It infects the spine, leaving the mind sharp, but the spirit undeniably obedient. Machiavelli, with his clear-eyed pragmatism, would have instantly recognized it for what it truly is, a political disease meticulously disguised as a virtue. Most men, tragically, remain oblivious to their infection. They equate their politeness with profound morality. They mistake their silence for mature wisdom. They believe their self-sacrifice is inherently noble. But beneath that carefully constructed mask lies a brutal truth. People-pleasing is nothing more than fear wearing a smile. This disease doesn't manifest in adulthood. Its insidious origins begin the first time you are punished for uttering no, the first time you are admonished for being difficult. It begins the first time you are rewarded, even subtly, for staying quietly within the lines. You learn, very young, that approval is synonymous with safety. You are taught that making others even slightly uncomfortable makes you inherently bad. You are systematically trained to believe that conflict, any form of friction, is dangerous, and that harmony, at any cost, is sacred. So, you adapt. You fold your legitimate anger into yourself, dimming your natural instincts. You replace your own nascent desires with whatever ensures an artificial, fleeting peace. Over time, this becomes a habit, then a deeply ingrained belief, then an unshakable identity. And the world, the very system that benefits from your compliance, claps for you. You're such a good boy, so polite, so easy to work with. They praise the disease because it renders you predictable, because it makes you harmless, because it ensures you will never truly challenge them. Engrave it. Silence is not golden. It's a blade you turn on yourself. The symptoms of this insidious infection are rampant. By the time you reach adulthood, the disease has fully matured, manifesting in ways you barely register anymore. You apologize when you've done nothing wrong, a reflex born not of guilt but of ingrained habit. You agree with people you inherently disrespect, simply to avoid the slightest tension in the air. You cling to draining relationships, fearing the void of being alone more than the slow torture of perpetual unhappiness. You work harder than everyone else, yet speak up less than anyone. You tolerate insults, delays, blatant disrespect, and meticulously convince yourself it's not a big deal. Everything becomes not a big deal until one harrowing day you wake up and realize your entire life has become one long, suffocating string of not a big deal. Meanwhile, the very people around you, those you've so desperately tried to please, continue to take, to demand, to expect, because this disease, your people-pleasing, doesn't make others kinder to you. It makes them bolder, more entitled, more aggressive in their demands. You think people genuinely appreciate your niceness? They don't. When you are unable to say no, they correctly assume you possess no boundaries. When you visibly fear conflict, they assume you lack the courage or conviction to defend yourself. When you rush to help everyone, they assume your time, your most precious resource, has no inherent value. When you are perpetually available, they assume you are simply not important enough to be scarce. Human beings, at their core, do not respond to abstract kindness. They respond to cost, to consequence, to clearly defined boundaries. A man without boundaries cannot command respect. He can only beg for it, often without even realizing the pathetic posture he's adopted. This is the fatal flaw, the ultimate Achilles heel of the people-pleaser. He attempts to purchase respect with kindness, but kindness, when offered without an underlying cost or clear boundaries, is perceived as free. And what is freely given, what is always available, often has no perceived value. The world, in its brutal realism, rewards scarcity, not endless generosity. It rewards unwavering resolve, not placid agreeableness. It rewards profound strength, not self-sacrificing softness. And deep down, every man knows this. Even the people-pleaser, in his quieter moments of introspection, knows it. That's why he feels perpetually exhausted, consistently disrespected, constantly overlooked. He is living in a moral fantasy, a self-delusion, while everyone else is operating in the stark, unvarnished reality. Don't forget it. You don't need noise. You command gravity. The people-pleaser isn't merely nice. He is, in a profound and debilitating way, addicted to external approval, addicted to an artificial, fragile peace, addicted to the immediate avoidance of discomfort. Every yes he utters grants him a fleeting moment of relief, a temporary high that whispers, "At least no one is upset with me right now." But the catastrophic cost is long-term spiritual decay, a slow, agonizing erosion of the soul. He trades his self-respect for transient harmony. He trades his core integrity for ephemeral approval. He trades his entire future, his potential, for superficial comfort in the present. And the most tragic part? He genuinely believes he's being good. He thinks he's being noble. But there is absolutely nothing noble about being fundamentally weak, nothing moral about lying through a forced smile, nothing righteous about sacrificing your essence for people who would, without a second thought, abandon you in your moment of need. Every people-pleaser, inevitably, reaches the same harrowing moment, the breaking point. It's the moment where the polite mask, so meticulously crafted, finally cracks, and the buried anger, years of unspoken resentment, begins to leak through. This resentment isn't primarily directed at those who exploited him, but inward, at himself, for his abject failure to protect his own being. That is the true disease. Not the world mistreating you, but you allowing it. And once that stark truth is fully seen, you cannot, you will not, go back. Niceness gets a man used because the world has learned, with ruthless efficiency, to read it for what it truly is. Not an inherent virtue, not profound goodness, but a quiet, almost pathetic, announcement that he has no defenses. A polite man, steeped in his fantasy, believes he is being moral. Everyone else, operating on instinct, interprets him as someone who will not fight back, who will offer minimal resistance. And human beings, every single one, are drawn almost instinctively toward whatever offers the path of least resistance. It's not necessarily malice, it's primal instinct, an evolutionary drive. People will always choose the easiest path, and the people-pleaser, with his endless concessions, is always that path. You can observe this pattern, this tragic dynamic, everywhere you look. The nice man becomes the one who consistently stays late, long after everyone else has departed. He becomes the friend who always adjusts his demanding schedule, while nobody ever reciprocates. He becomes the partner who constantly offers reassurance, but receives none in return, not because he is loved less, but because he is profoundly respected less. True respect is meticulously built on clearly defined boundaries. Niceness, tragically, is built on their very absence. And a man without boundaries inevitably becomes a tool, a mere convenience, something to be picked up when needed and callously set aside when not. Remember that. Strength isn't in what you do, it's in what you refuse. The people-pleaser, in his delusion, believes that kindness will automatically generate gratitude. In reality, kindness offered without cost, without consequence, without clear boundaries, cultivates nothing but entitlement. When you give too freely, too readily, people don't think, "He's so generous." They think, "He'll do it again." The first favor feels like genuine appreciation. The 10th favor begins to feel like an unspoken expectation. The 30th becomes an unquestioned requirement. And the very moment you hesitate, the instant you even consider saying no, people will look at you with genuine offense, as if you have unilaterally broken a sacred contract they never even had to sign. Niceness, in its subtle tyranny, conditions people. It trains them. It meticulously teaches them that your time is always infinitely available. Your energy is always endlessly accessible. Your tolerance is limitless. Your resistance is non-existent. Once someone becomes comfortable with that compliant, pliable version of you, they will not willingly adjust when you finally attempt to assert yourself. They will get offended. They will push back, often aggressively. They will accuse you of fundamentally changing. But the truth is, you are not changing. You are simply ceasing the performance, the elaborate charade from which they have so comfortably benefited for so long. Humans sense hierarchy long before they ever truly understand it. They subconsciously categorize others, placing them instinctively above or below themselves. A man who never pushes back, never asserts his will, never imposes the slightest friction, is inevitably placed at the very bottom of that unspoken hierarchy. not because others actively despise him, but because his very demeanor, his actions, signal that he belongs precisely there. And people, whether they admit it or not, respond to signals, not to your well-intentioned but often meaningless intentions. Look closely at the individuals who consistently command respect, who wield genuine influence. They are not rude for the sake of rudeness. They are simply and powerfully unafraid of displeasing others. That, right there, is the crucial difference. They do not chase approval, so their mere presence carries an undeniable weight, a gravitas. They do not cling desperately to artificial harmony, so their words, when spoken, possess an undeniable force, a cutting clarity. They do not fear conflict, so their boundaries remain immovably intact, like ancient, unyielding stone. Even their silence feels stronger, more significant, more potent than a people-pleaser's most enthusiastic, self-sacrificing yes. Engrave it. Your gaze alone can make others pause. Don't waste it. People mistakenly believe that raw confidence alone draws respect. It doesn't. Consequence does. If crossing you, if disrespecting your boundaries carries no tangible consequence, then you cannot command respect. You can only pathetically hope for it. People do not genuinely respect what is utterly safe, utterly predictable, utterly pliable. They respect what is stable, what is firm, what is unmovable. Niceness, in its inherent nature, is none of these things. Niceness bends. Niceness yields. Niceness absorbs the blow, then tragically smiles afterward, hoping for approval. And once someone observes that you can absorb a blow, any blow, without responding, without asserting yourself, they instinctively stop treating you like someone who can deliver one. There is always a moment, an inevitable turning point, when the people-pleaser realizes the immense, self-inflicted damage he has wrought upon himself. It manifests as a profound exhaustion, but it's deeper than mere physical fatigue. It is the crushing awareness that his entire personality, his very identity, has been meticulously shaped around avoiding other people's disappointment. He sees with agonizing clarity how often he agreed when his soul screamed no, how often he showed up when he was utterly unvalued, how often he tolerated words and actions that would have made a stronger, self-respecting man simply walk away. And in that moment, he feels a searing resentment, not primarily toward the opportunistic people who used him, but intensely toward himself, for allowing it. That deep, corrosive resentment is the undeniable symptom of a dying identity. The mask is cracking, crumbling. The raw, unvarnished truth is leaking through. A man who devotes his entire existence to pleasing everyone else eventually comes face to face with the one person he pleased, the very least, himself. Niceness gets you used because the world, in its cold, objective reality, only truly respects a man who fundamentally respects himself. And self-respect isn't loud, it isn't arrogant, it isn't aggressive or cruel. It is simply the quiet, unyielding ability to say no without elaborate explanation, without pathetic apology, without so much as a tremor in your voice. It is the resolute refusal to betray your own core being, your integrity, simply to keep someone else temporarily comfortable. It is the unwavering willingness to disappoint others, rather than constantly disappointing yourself. Niceness, that false virtue, will not save you. Strength will. Unyielding boundaries will. A calculated, selective coldness will. And the moment you stop offering your life, your time, your energy, your very essence as a discount service, the world, with all its resistance, will inevitably adjust. Not willingly, not gracefully, but inevitably. Because people only stop using you when you effectively stop being usable. Rudeness has been demonized for a profoundly strategic reason, not because it's inherently immoral, not because it's genuinely harmful, but because it directly threatens the very systems that rely on your predictable, subservient obedience. From the moment you could speak, they ingrained in you that being rude was the ultimate social sin, not lying, not calculated manipulation, not profound cowardice, rudeness. The slightest hint of firmness in your voice was punished. The faintest sign of a nascent spine was instantly labeled attitude. They didn't fear cruelty, they feared a man who could simply say no without apology, without explanation, because a man who can say no cannot be controlled. Don't forget it. Strength isn't in what you do, it's in what you refuse. Rudeness, in its purest, most powerful form, is simply the unapologetic refusal to accommodate. It is the direct rejection of the unspoken rule that you must, at all times, be pleasant, agreeable, and non-threatening. It is the profound willingness to disappoint others, and that, more than any other trait, is what makes it so incredibly powerful. The world does not bend for the agreeable, it bends, it yields, it reshapes itself for the unyielding. The people who consistently get what they want in this life are not the ones who make everyone else comfortable. They are the ones who make themselves utterly impossible to ignore. A firm, resolute tone is instantly perceived as strength. A direct, unambiguous statement is instantly perceived as authority. A refusal, spoken plainly and without hesitation, is perceived as a quiet, formidable danger. Even the smallest, most blunt act of honesty instantly shifts the psychological dynamic of any interaction. People stop assuming. They stop demanding. They begin to recalibrate, to adjust their internal compass, because suddenly you are no longer predictable, you are no longer pliable, you are no longer safe in their convenient framework. And human beings, at their core, instinctively respect what they cannot predict, what they cannot easily control. This is precisely why rudeness, when wielded strategically, feels like such profound power. It's not the sharpness of the words themselves, it's the unbreachable boundary that stands firmly behind them. You've witnessed this dynamic your entire life. The coworker who simply states, "I won't be doing that," is almost immediately treated like a higher-ranking figure than the one who smiles, nods, and agrees to everything. The man who politely but firmly refuses an invitation instantly gains more intrigue, more perceived value, than the one who eagerly accepts every single offer. The woman who declares, "This doesn't work for me," is valued far more than the one who tolerates everything quietly, simmering with resentment. Nobody will admit this truth out loud, but everyone, instinctively, reacts to it. The person who refuses is the person perceived to have value, and the person with value is never truly ignored. Rudeness, real rudeness, is simply the quiet courage to prioritize yourself openly, without apology or explanation. It's not theatrics, it's not gratuitous cruelty, it's not overt aggression, it is pure, unadulterated clarity. A man who is willing to be blunt, to speak his truth unvarnished, communicates something profoundly terrifying to those who would control him. He cannot be manipulated by guilt. Guilt is society's favorite, most effective weapon. Guilt is precisely how they keep you polite, how they keep you small, how they keep you confined to their expectations. But the moment guilt loses its suffocating effect on you, the entire power structure, the entire dynamic, instantly flips. Suddenly, irrevocably, you are the one others must adjust to. Don't forget it. Your gaze alone can make others pause. Don't waste it. Here's the psychological secret no one openly teaches. People will tolerate rudeness from the powerful, but they will aggressively punish it in the weak. If a formidable leader snaps, it's often dismissed as intensity, a sign of their singular focus or genius. If a dominant personality speaks bluntly, it's lauded as confidence. But if a timid, compliant man dares to do the exact same, they will instantly brand him disrespectful, arrogant, difficult. Why? Because strength legitimizes a certain bluntness, an unyielding stance. Weakness does not. This is precisely why kindness, when it emanates from a powerful man, is truly respected. It is a conscious choice, a strategic option, but that same kindness, emanating from a weak man, is nothing more than a desperate survival mechanism, a pathetic plea for acceptance, and it utterly destroys him. One is respected, the other is systematically taken advantage of. Rudeness, when wielded with intent, changes this dynamic instantly. It sends a clear, unmistakable message to the world. My kindness is optional now, not automatic. It is a deliberate choice, not a default setting. It introduces friction, and friction, that necessary grinding of two forces, compels people to reevaluate their ingrained behavior toward you. When you speak bluntly, you immediately raise the perceived cost of interaction. When you refuse politely but firmly, you raise that cost even further. When you articulate your boundaries clearly, without wrapping them in layers of apologies or justifications, you raise the cost to its rightful, deserved level. Suddenly, you are no longer the discounted version of yourself, the bargain bin offering. You are full price, and you demand it. This is precisely why rudeness, in this context, feels like such a profound liberation. Because for the very first time, you stop begging for dignity and start, with quiet force, enforcing it. Most people are completely unprepared for this radical shift. They expect the old version of you, the agreeable one, the soft one, the one who was effortlessly easy to predict and manipulate. When they encounter your new tone, your new boundaries, they will react. They'll brand you rude, difficult, arrogant, selfish. Understand this. They are not accurately describing your behavior. They are describing their profound loss of convenient access. Rudeness, in this context, is simply what happens when you lock the doors they once walked through freely, carelessly, without permission. Once they realize that you are no longer afraid of disappointing them, the entire game changes. They adjust. They begin to think twice before making requests. They retract unreasonable demands. They approach you with a newfound care, a cautious respect. They treat your time with seriousness, not as an infinite resource. They choose their words more wisely, more intentionally. They become more respectful, not because you suddenly became nicer, but because you became someone they cannot push, cannot manipulate, cannot ignore. That is the true formidable power of strategic rudeness. It restores the balance. It returns you to yourself, to your core. It unequivocally signals that your life, your resources, your emotional energy are no longer a public resource for casual consumption. You stop being the soft cushion that absorbs every single blow, every expectation, every imposition. You become the unyielding wall they cannot move. And in a world relentlessly built on pressure, on expectation, on constant demand, there is nothing more powerful than the man who simply refuses to bend. Remember that. You don't chase, you magnetize. Learning to become strategically disagreeable is not about becoming overtly hostile, cruel, or aggressive. It is about the profound act of reclaiming the inherent authority you unwittingly surrendered, piece by piece, without even realizing it. The world, in its conditioning, taught you that being easy to work with makes you admirable, that being endlessly flexible makes you mature, that being infinitely patient makes you virtuous. But the truth, stripped bare, is far simpler and infinitely more brutal. The man who constantly fears disagreement, the man who shies away from conflict, ultimately fears himself. And a man who fears himself, who denies his own internal truth, can never, under any circumstances, become truly powerful. The absolute first step in this profound transformation, this journey into becoming someone formidable, is understanding that conflict is not a threat to be avoided at all costs. It is, quite simply, information. Most people, with their ingrained conditioning, instinctively avoid disagreement not because they are genuinely peaceful, but because they are fundamentally fragile. They crumble internally the moment someone pushes back even slightly. They panic when their precious external approval is threatened. They retreat the instant tension rises, as if tension itself is an inherent sign that they have committed some unforgivable error. This is the insidious conditioning you must systematically dismantle. You must become utterly comfortable standing unflinchingly inside the heat of disapproval. Let people be irritated. Let them misunderstand you. Let them feel disappointed. Their emotions are emphatically not your responsibility. Their expectations are not your commands. Their volatile reactions are not your burden to bear. You are not here to meticulously manage their comfort. You are here, first and foremost, to protect your own sacred sovereignty, your unalienable self-possession. Once you strip away that reflexive, debilitating instinct to immediately appease, something strange and liberating begins to happen. You begin to observe, with newfound clarity, how rarely genuine disagreement truly escalates into anything genuinely dangerous. People push hard, aggressively, only when they instinctively sense you will collapse fast, that you lack the internal fortitude to resist. When you stop collapsing, when you stand firm, they stop pushing. What you feared so intensely was never real. The conflict itself wasn't the threat. Your own insecure imagination was. And once you confront that reality, you realize you were living under a powerful spell, a hypnotic illusion cast by your own pervasive insecurity. Remember that. I don't need volume, I possess gravity. The next crucial stage in this journey is practicing blunt honesty, not cruelty, not emotional violence, but simply the unvarnished truth, delivered without the sugarcoating, the polite evasions, the careful cushioning you've employed your entire life. Simple, direct phrases. This doesn't work for me. I'm not available. That's not my responsibility. I disagree. To the entrenched people-pleaser, these are not just simple sentences. They feel like detonating explosives, a radical act of rebellion, and in a profound way, they are. They systematically destroy the brittle version of you who relied on softness, on compliance, to survive. They shatter the predictable pattern others have come to expect, to demand. They obliterate the illusion that your compliance, your agreement, your acquiescence is guaranteed. You will feel a deep, reflexive guilt the first few times you utter these truths. You will experience the intense, almost overwhelming urge to explain yourself in lengthy, rambling paragraphs, to soften your tone, to desperately try and ensure the other person doesn't feel offended. Do not, under any circumstances, collapse back into that ingrained instinct. You are not responsible for meticulously managing other people's reactions. You are solely responsible for maintaining your own truth, your own integrity. And truth, in its purest form, demands simplicity, clarity, and directness. Over time, a new identity, a stronger, more authentic self, will begin to take shape. This identity no longer uses politeness as a fragile shield. You begin choosing silence over the frantic need to please. You begin valuing your own comfort, your own peace, over the comfort of those who perpetually drain your energy. You stop volunteering for unnecessary tasks, for burdens that are not yours to bear. You stop accepting invitations purely out of obligation. You stop pretending to agree when your mind burns with contradiction, with dissent, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, without fanfare or grand pronouncements, you become someone who is no longer shaped, no longer defined by external demands, by the endless noise of others' expectations. You become a man shaped by robust internal standards, by your own unwavering will. People will notice this transformation. Some, the strong and discerning, will respect you more profoundly than ever before. Others, the insecure and parasitic, will fear you. Those who consistently benefited from your softness, from your endless compliance, will resent you bitterly. Remember this fundamental truth. When you stop sacrificing yourself for others, they will, inevitably, interpret it as a profound betrayal. Their disappointment is not a sign that you have done something wrong. It is, precisely, a sign that you have finally stopped doing something wrong to yourself. The real transformation, the profound, irreversible shift, happens when you truly realize that disagreeableness, the unwavering willingness to stand firm, to refuse, to confront, to create necessary friction, is the foundational bedrock of all genuine power. Every strong leader, every influential personality, every truly respected individual shares this one undeniable trait. They are willing to create friction. They do not chase an artificial harmony. They do not fear tension. They do not adjust their core identity to fit the room. They let the room and the people within it adjust to them. When you embody this way of being, your very presence changes. People speak to you differently, with more gravitas. They anticipate your boundaries. They inherently consider your time valuable, finite, and precious. They think twice, truly think, before casually placing burdens on your shoulders. They do not assume access to you. They do not assume your agreement. They do not assume your compliance. You become someone who must be approached with deliberate intention, not with careless assumption, and that, in its most distilled essence, is power, the ability to command attention, to make your reactions matter, to have your boundaries fundamentally alter others' behavior, to have your mere presence impose structure, order, and respect. Disagreeableness is not a descent into darkness. It is the ascent into absolute clarity. It is the profound ability to navigate the world without betraying yourself in the agonizing process. You are not becoming rude. You are becoming real. And the world, in its deepest, most primal core, only truly respects what is real. Remember that. I don't need volume. I possess gravity. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes something profoundly unsettling. Most of what he meticulously labeled kindness was never, truly, kindness at all. It was strategy. It was fear. It was a desperate, ingrained way to attempt to make the world less dangerous, less threatening, by systematically making himself smaller, less noticeable, less impactful. You softened your voice so you wouldn't provoke anyone. You agreed quickly so no one would dare think you were difficult. You suppressed your own needs, your own desires, so you would never, ever be perceived as a burden. This is the tragic survival mechanism of the people-pleaser, enduring by disappearing a little more each day. But survival is not living, and a man who steadily disappears eventually reaches a point where the world, in its relentless churn, no longer notices he exists at all. When you begin the systematic process of killing the people-pleaser inside you, you must confront this brutal truth directly. You have spent years, precious years, negotiating away intrinsic parts of yourself in a desperate exchange for temporary, fragile peace. You paid for fleeting approval with permanent, spiritual self-loss. You handed out pieces of your dignity, your very essence, like free samples at a market stall. And now, the daunting task. You must reclaim them, one by one, with unwavering resolve. The first thing you reclaim is your time. You stop handing it out like a consolation prize, like it's infinitely abundant and utterly worthless. You stop rushing to answer messages the very moment they arrive, treating every ping as an urgent command. You stop rearranging your entire day, contorting your schedule to accommodate someone who would never, for a second, consider doing the same for you. You begin asking yourself a fundamental question the people-pleaser never dares to ask. Is this truly worth my life? Because time is life, and when you give it freely, carelessly, without clear boundaries, you are donating your very existence to people who have not, in any meaningful way, earned it. Then you reclaim your voice, not the polite, emasculated whisper you've been meticulously trained to use. your real voice, the one that speaks truth, unvarnished, without trembling, without apology. You start telling people when you genuinely disagree. You start expressing your preferences, your desires, without a single apology or elaborate justification. You stop lying, even small, white lies, just to avoid the slightest hint of conflict. You stop pretending that everything is perfectly fine when, deep down, it isn't. This act alone, this embrace of radical honesty, profoundly transforms the way people treat you, because honesty, raw honesty, immediately disrupts the comfortable, convenient script they have written for you. Next, you reclaim your presence. You stop walking into rooms like a hesitant guest in your own life, like you need permission to occupy space. You stop shrinking your posture, literally making yourself smaller to appear non-threatening, more agreeable. You stop nodding reflexively at everything just to seem compliant, easygoing. Your energy, your very aura, shifts from a desperate, "I hope I fit in," to a powerful, "I am willing to stand alone, if necessary." And people feel that profound shift instantly. Presence is not about speaking loudly or dominating the conversation. It is about existing fully, authentically, unapologetically. The world instinctively senses when you finally stop hiding from yourself. Then comes the difficult but ultimately liberating part. You reclaim your standards. The people-pleaser has none. He accepts crumbs, then meticulously convinces himself they are lavish meals. He tolerates blatant disrespect, then tragically renames it patience. He stays in situations that utterly drain his life force and rationalizes it as loyalty. But a man with standards, a man who values himself, begins filtering his world with ruthless efficiency. He stops desperately trying to keep everyone within his orbit. He becomes selective, discerning, uncompromising. He walks away, calmly and without drama, when something isn't right, when it doesn't align with his values, his integrity. Instead of endlessly negotiating in circles, trying to fix what should never be tolerated in the first place, he simply exits. This is precisely where people begin to pull away. Not because you've suddenly become cruel, but because you've finally stopped being utterly convenient. The moment you develop clear, unwavering standards, you suddenly require effort from others. And that effort, or lack thereof, instantly reveals who actually values you for who you are versus who valued you only for what you provided. The people who vanish were never truly yours. They were loyal only to your softness, to your compliance, not to your soul, your authentic self. Let them disappear. Their absence creates the sacred space, the necessary void, for people who will finally treat you like a human being of inherent value, not merely a useful tool. The most important thing you reclaim, however, is your inner permission. The permission to unapologetically take up space. The permission to consciously disappoint people without a shred of guilt. The permission to say no without explanation, without apology, without compromise. The permission to choose yourself first, without a trace of self-recrimination. When you finally grant yourself that profound inner permission, you become untouchable in a way that no amount of bravado, no outward posturing, could ever truly create. You stop needing external validation because you validate yourself from within. You stop fearing abandonment because you no longer abandon yourself. This seismic shift doesn't transform you into a ruthless, uncaring individual. It transforms you into a sovereign being, a man who is sovereign over himself, who masters his own internal kingdom, is a dangerous force indeed, because he is no longer controlled by the fleeting emotions of others, the capricious opinions of strangers, or the insidious manipulations of those who relentlessly seek to benefit from his compliance. He is guided by internal laws, by an unshakable moral compass, not by external pressure or expectation. As this formidable version of you emerges, something truly fascinating begins to happen. The world, in its response, changes its tone. People become more careful, more respectful, more intentional in their interactions with you. They don't casually walk into your life anymore, making demands with the same sense of inherent entitlement. They don't simply assume your agreement, your compliance, your endless availability. They approach you with the undeniable awareness that you now possess a spine, an unyielding core, and that spine has a cost. This is the true beginning of power, not dominance over others, but profound dominance over yourself. The man who commands himself, who truly governs his internal landscape, inevitably commands his external environment. And the man who commands his environment alters the course of his entire life, permanently, irrevocably. Remember that. There comes a stage in your transformation when something subtle, yet unmistakable, profoundly shifts inside you. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop asking permission from a world that, truthfully, never cared about your comfort in the first place. You stop translating your deepest desires, your boldest ambitions, into softer, diluted versions just so others won't feel threatened, won't feel uncomfortable. What emerges from this crucible is a man who acts from a center that simply cannot be bent, cannot be manipulated, cannot be guilt-tripped into compliance. A man who is no longer living in constant, anxious reaction to other people's volatile emotions, their endless demands. A man who has, finally, stepped into the dangerous, exhilarating freedom of being unapologetically himself. This formidable version of you does not shout, he does not posture aggressively. His power is quieter, colder, sharper. It emanates from the profound absence of fear, not from the overt presence of aggression. He no longer wastes precious energy trying to be liked. He doesn't chase shallow understanding. He does not soften the raw truth to avoid temporary discomfort. He simply exists as he is, in his unvarnished authenticity, and that alone fundamentally changes the dynamics of every room he walks into. People notice it immediately, instinctively, even before you utter a single word. There is a palpable heaviness to you now, an undeniable gravity. You carry yourself like someone who has definitively stopped minimizing his own presence, his own impact. You do not rush to fill silences with nervous chatter. You do not perform forced friendliness. You do not fake enthusiasm to appease others. Your stillness, your quietude, speaks louder, with more authority, than the old version of you ever could. The world looks at you differently because you are no longer signaling weakness, no longer radiating easy pliability. You become a mirror that reflects people back to themselves. Those who are strong, who are secure in their own being, will respect you deeply. Those who are insecure, who thrive on control, will fear you. Those who once relied on your softness, on your endless compliance, will resent you bitterly. But none of these external reactions, none of this outward turmoil touches you anymore. Your self-worth is no longer out there, subject to external validation. It's in here, locked securely beneath your rib cage, untouchable, unassailable. Being unapologetic doesn't mean you stop caring entirely. It means you stop contorting yourself into unnatural shapes to please others. It means you stop abandoning yourself, your own truth, to maintain an artificial peace that always cost you too much. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you finally, truly understand yourself. You no longer fear being alone because you finally, deeply enjoy your own company. You no longer fear disappointing other people because you have finally, definitively, stopped disappointing yourself. This seismic shift, this profound internal revolution, terrifies the world because it systematically eliminates their leverage over you. They cannot guilt you. They cannot pressure you. They cannot shame you into compliance. They cannot use your desire for approval against you because you no longer desire it. You have stepped, definitively, outside the psychological cage they spent years meticulously building around you. And freedom, real freedom, makes you gloriously unpredictable. Your relationships transform. You stop tolerating half-hearted effort. You stop accepting conditional respect, transactional affection. You stop entertaining people who only show up when they desperately need something from you. The moment someone instinctively senses that you will not beg, will not bend, will not cling, the dynamic either purifies into something genuine or dissolves completely. The ones who stay treat you with the seriousness, the profound respect you always deserved. The ones who leave were never truly invested in your soul. They were merely feeding on your weakness, not your warmth, not your light. Your decisions transform. You no longer choose the safe option by default, sacrificing your potential for comfort. You no longer sacrifice your own progress, your own ascent, to avoid upsetting others. You no longer dilute your ambitions, your core purpose, just to keep an artificial peace. Every choice becomes cleaner, harder, more honest, more aligned with your authentic self. You start building a life that is fundamentally aligned with who you are, not who you pretended to be, not who they expected you to be. Your standards transform. You stop explaining why something is unacceptable. You stop repeating yourself. You stop negotiating with people who are clearly not negotiating in good faith. You do not raise your voice, because raised voices are for men who lack true power. You simply walk away, and the act of walking away, in its quiet finality, becomes the strongest declaration of self-respect you have ever made. The rise of the unapologetic self is not loud, it is not dramatic. It is the quiet, dignified death of the boy who desperately needed approval, and the powerful, inevitable birth of the man who simply doesn't. It is the end of the psychological slavery you carried since childhood. It is the final collapse of the identity that kept you useful to everyone but yourself. And once this profound shift happens, something irreversible takes place. You stop living reactively, defensively, and you start living architecturally. You build, you choose, you define, you lead. You no longer wait to be chosen. You choose yourself first, unequivocally, and let the world adapt to that unshakable truth. This version of you is not rude. He is undeniable, not aggressive, uncompromising, not cruel, unbreakable. You've come this far. You've seen the truth most people spend their entire lives frantically avoiding. You've watched the old version of yourself fracture, collapse, and finally die. And now you stand, a formidable presence, someone the world can no longer mold, no longer guilt, no longer control. But understand this. Transformation isn't a single magical moment. It's a war. Every single day, the world will subtly, insidiously, try to drag you back into the old role. The obedient one, the quiet one, the useful one. You do not let them. You hold your ground. You protect your voice. You choose yourself first. Not once, but every single day that follows. Because the rise of the unapologetic self is not a temporary spark, a fleeting burst of courage. It's a permanent, irreversible shift, a declaration that from this point forward, your life will no longer be dictated by approval, by fear, or by the crushing weight of external expectation, only by your will. I choose, I command, I stand.